Daniel Carter stepped out of the shuttle, his boots pressing into the smooth, polished floor of the Zitherian royal palace. The structure around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, crystalline walls that shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the hues of a setting sun from a planet light years away from Earth. He had been chosen as Earth's diplomat, sent to the Zitherian Empire for an important mission, to secure a treaty that would prevent an intergalactic war. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage, and Zitherians, a race of tall, elegant beings with silver-blue skin and glowing markings, held the power to either protect Earth or leave it vulnerable to hostile forces. Daniel adjusted his collar, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He wasn't a soldier or a warrior, just a negotiator trying to make sure humanity survived in a universe full of powerful alien species. A Zitherian official, draped in flowing white robes with gold insignias, stepped forward. His pale silver eyes scanned Daniel with an unreadable expression. Human. Follow. His voice was deep, almost musical, but it held no warmth. Daniel nodded and followed the official down a long, glowing corridor. The walls seemed to hum with energy, pulsing in rhythm with their steps. Everything here felt alive, as if the palace itself was watching him. After several turns, they reached a pair of towering golden doors, carved with intricate alien symbols. The official gestured toward them. "These are your quarters. You will rest here before the formal meeting with Her Highness." Daniel exhaled, grateful for a moment of peace. "Thank you." The official didn't respond, simply turning and walking away, leaving Daniel standing alone. He touched the door, and it slid open silently, revealing a luxurious chamber, larger than any hotel room he had ever seen. The furniture was sleek yet elegant, shaped in a way that suggested Zitherians valued beauty as much as function. The walls were lined with softly glowing blue panels, casting a calming light across the room. At the center was a large, circular bed, covered in silk-like fabric that shimmered like the night sky. Daniel set his bag down, rubbing his temples. His mind was still racing from the long journey, the weight of negotiations, and the unknown customs of the Zitherians. He reached for his wrist communicator, planning to record some notes, when a voice interrupted him. A soft, distant hum, almost like singing. Frowning, Daniel turned his head. The sound was coming from a door on the far side of the chamber, partially open. Curious, he stepped closer. Had the official given him the wrong room? He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open wider, and froze. Standing in front of him, bathed in the soft golden light of an alien chandelier, was a Zitherian woman, her long silver hair cascading down her bare shoulders, her glowing markings pulsing in surprise. She was unclothed, and her wide violet eyes locked onto his in shock. A stunned silence filled the room. Daniel had just walked in on the Zitherian princess. Daniel's heart stopped for a moment. His brain screamed at him to look away, turn around, apologize, do something, but his body refused to move. The Zitherian woman standing before him was stunningly alien, yet there was an undeniable elegance to her. Her silver-blue skin glowed faintly, intricate bioluminescent markings flowing across her collarbone and arms like shifting constellations. Her long, silken white silver hair cascaded down her back, barely covering her exposed form. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Then, "Ah!" Her soft gasp shattered the silence. Her hand shot up in shock, covering her chest, her glowing markings pulsing in a rapid, panicked rhythm. Daniel snapped out of his trance. "Oh crap, I'm so sorry," he blurted, immediately spinning around and raising his hands in surrender. His face burned with embarrassment. The sound of quick footsteps followed as the woman scrambled behind a shimmering golden curtain, grabbing a thin, flowing robe and pulling it over her form. "You, how dare you enter my private chambers?" she snapped, her voice sharp yet filled with an underlying nervous energy. Daniel kept his back turned, hands still raised. "I swear, I didn't mean to. I was given this room, and look, This is a huge misunderstanding. Silence. Then a soft intake of breath. Given this room. Daniel hesitated. Yes? A few heartbeats passed. Then she spoke, her tone calmer now, but still laced with suspicion. Turn around. Slowly. Daniel gulped, then carefully turned. The woman now stood with her arms crossed, the thin fabric of her robe flowing like liquid metal in the soft light. Though she was covered, her bright violet eyes remained locked onto him, full of intensity. Then it hit him. She wasn't just any Zitherian woman. She was Princess Veyara, the heir to the Zitherian throne. Daniel's stomach dropped. He had just barged into a royal's private quarters, an act that, in many alien cultures, could be considered a grave offense. He exhaled, trying to steady himself. The princess. Veyara's expression tightened, her glowing markings dimming slightly. And you're the human diplomat. She tilted her head. I was told you would arrive tomorrow. Daniel blinked. Tomorrow. Veyara sighed, rubbing her temples. It seems there was an error. Before Daniel could respond, a sudden pounding echoed from the outer door. Princess Veyara, is everything all right? A deep, commanding voice. One of the royal guards. Daniel felt his breath hitch. If the guards found him here. Veyara's violet eyes narrowed slightly, as if debating something. Then, to his complete shock, she turned toward the door and said, Everything is fine. Do not enter. Daniel stared at her. Why was she covering for him? One thing was clear. This mistake had just made his mission 1,000 times more complicated. Daniel stood frozen, his mind racing. Why had Princess Veyara covered for him? She could have easily let the guards storm in and arrest him for trespassing in a royal chamber. Yet, she had chosen to protect him. For now. The pounding on the door stopped, and a heavy silence followed. Then the guard's voice came again, less aggressive but still firm. Are you certain, Your Highness? We detected an energy disturbance in your quarters. Veyara glanced at Daniel, her expression unreadable. She hesitated for a brief second before replying. Yes. Leave at once. A long pause. Then, reluctantly, the guard responded. As you command, Princess. The footsteps faded, but Daniel didn't feel relieved. Veyara turned back to him, her arms still crossed, her glowing markings flickering softly. You shouldn't be here, human, she said in a quieter voice. But there was no more anger, only curiosity. Why were you given this room? Daniel sighed. I don't know. The official led me here. I assumed it was my guest quarters. Veyara's eyes flickered with thought. Then someone made a mistake. A dangerous one. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Trust me, I didn't want to walk in on. He stopped himself before saying something that would make this situation even worse. Look, I'll leave. I don't want any trouble. Veyara studied him for a long moment, her piercing violet eyes searching his face. Then she nodded. Fine. Go, before anyone sees you. Relief flooded through Daniel, and he turned toward the door, but the moment he reached for it, it slid open, and 4 royal guards stood waiting outside. Their crimson and gold armor gleamed under the palace lights, their energy lances raised, ready for attack. The lead guard, a tall Zitherian with cold silver eyes, stepped forward. Human. His voice was sharp as a blade. You have dishonored the princess. You will come with us. Daniel raised his hand slowly, his heart pounding. Wait, this isn't what it looks like. Seize him. 2 guards grabbed his arms, yanking him out of the chamber. He struggled, but their alien strength was overwhelming. Stop. Veyara's voice rang through the corridor. The guards halted but did not release Daniel. The lead guard turned toward her and gave a deep bow. Your Highness, this human has violated sacred protocol. He must answer for his actions. Veyara's glowing markings pulsed again. She looked at Daniel, her face torn with hesitation. Then, with a sigh, she stepped forward. He did not enter my chambers intentionally. The guards exchanged glances, clearly confused. "But, Princess—" "I will handle this," Vayara interrupted, her voice firm. "Take him to the council chamber. No harm will come to him." Daniel clenched his jaw. Council chamber. That didn't sound good. As the guards dragged him through the towering palace halls, one thought burned in his mind. This diplomatic mission had just gone horribly wrong. Daniel sat in the Grand Council chamber, his wrists bound by glowing energy cuffs. The room was enormous, with tall crystal pillars reaching up to a golden ceiling and alien symbols glowing on the walls. At the center, a long curved table held a group of Zitherian officials, all dressed in elegant robes. Their silver-blue skin and glowing markings made them seem almost ethereal, but their expressions were far from welcoming. The Royal High Council was made up of elders, military leaders, and royal advisors, and they were not pleased. At the far end of the chamber, Princess Vayara stood tall, her glowing violet eyes locked onto Daniel. The elder at the center of the table leaned forward. His glowing golden robes marked him as the chief advisor, one of the most powerful figures in the empire. "Human, do you understand the gravity of your actions?" His voice was deep, full of authority. Daniel cleared his throat. "I swear, this was all a mistake. I didn't mean to enter the princess's chambers." A murmur spread across the council members. Some looked skeptical, while others whispered among themselves. The chief advisor's eyes narrowed. "The fact remains that you saw Her Highness in an unclothed state." Daniel winced, his face heating up again. "It was an accident. I turned away immediately." One of the officials, a stern-looking female Zitherian, scoffed. "The act has already been done. According to our customs, such an event is significant." Daniel blinked. "Significant? What do you mean?" Vayara sighed, stepping forward. "In Zitherian tradition, if an outsider witnesses a royal unclothed, it is not just an embarrassment, it is a binding moment." Daniel frowned. "Binding? As in?" The chief advisor's gaze hardened. "It is a sacred act of fate, a moment where two souls are intertwined by the will of the stars." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Wait, are you saying—" The female official nodded sharply. "You have inadvertently declared a claim on the princess." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. "What?" A louder murmur spread through the room. Some officials looked outraged, others intrigued. Vayara clenched her fists. Her glowing markings flickered as she stared at Daniel. "That is why this situation is so complicated." The chief advisor turned toward her. "Princess, the law is clear. If the human does not complete the proper ritual, this will bring dishonor upon your name." Daniel looked back and forth between them. "What ritual? I don't even know what's happening anymore." Vayara hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "You must undergo the trial of proving, a test to determine if you are worthy to stand beside a royal." Daniel's head spun. He had come here for a peaceful negotiation, and now he was being forced into some kind of alien honor trial. He sighed, looking up at the ceiling. "This is officially the craziest day of my life." Daniel sat in stunned silence as the words echoed in his mind. A trial, to prove he was worthy of standing beside the princess. This was not how his diplomatic mission was supposed to go. He looked at Vayara, hoping she would step in and say this was all a misunderstanding. But the Zitherian princess remained silent, her glowing violet eyes fixed on the council. The chief advisor turned to him, his expression serious and unwavering. "The trial of proving is an ancient tradition. It is the only way to settle this matter without dishonoring the royal house." Daniel frowned. "And what exactly does this trial involve?" A different council member, a tall, battle-scarred Zitherian, spoke. 3 challenges: a test of intelligence, a test of endurance, and a test of trust. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And if I refuse?" The chief advisor's glowing eyes narrowed. "Then you will be exiled from Zitherian space immediately, and the alliance between our people will be broken. Exile? And worse, ruining humanity's chance for an alliance. Daniel clenched his jaw. He couldn't let that happen. Fine, he said, straightening his shoulders. I'll do it. A murmur spread through the council. Some of them looked impressed, others still skeptical. Veyara, however, seemed surprised. She studied him for a moment before stepping forward. Then the trial begins at dawn. The chief advisor nodded. Guards, take him to the preparation chamber. Before Daniel could even process what was happening, two heavily armored Zitherians grabbed his arms and led him out of the chamber. As he was dragged down the palace halls, he barely had time to think. What kind of insane trials was he about to face? Later that night, the preparation chamber. The preparation chamber was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. The walls glowed faintly, pulsing like a living thing. Strange, metallic energy bands wrapped around his wrists, scanning him. Veyara entered, stepping toward him. Now dressed in ceremonial robes of deep violet and gold, she looked even more regal. You didn't have to accept the trial, she said softly. Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. Yeah, well, I didn't have much of a choice. She hesitated before saying, most outsiders would have begged to be spared. You didn't. Daniel chuckled dryly. I guess humans don't know when to quit. A flicker of something, curiosity, admiration, crossed her face. Rest now, she finally said. Tomorrow, you face the trial of proving. And if you fail, you may not survive it. Daniel gulped. Daniel stood at the edge of the ancient Zitherian proving grounds, his heart pounding. The arena before him was a vast, open space, surrounded by towering crystal pillars that pulsed with energy. Above, the sky was a deep shade of violet, two moons casting an eerie glow over the scene. Across from him, members of the Royal High Council, noble spectators, and high-ranking officials had gathered to witness the trial. They whispered among themselves, most of them doubting that a mere human could survive their sacred test. At the center of it all, sitting on an elevated throne-like seat, was Princess Veyara. Her violet eyes remained unreadable as she watched him. Daniel wasn't sure if she wanted him to win or fail. A Zitherian warrior, dressed in heavy ceremonial armor, stepped forward and raised his voice. The first challenge, the test of intelligence, begins now. Daniel straightened, trying to mask his nerves. Okay, intelligence. This should be the easiest one. From the side of the arena, a group of Zitherian scholars emerged. They carried a large, glowing holographic cube that floated in midair, shifting in complex geometric patterns. The chief advisor stood. This is a simulation puzzle. You must navigate through the shifting maze of our knowledge archives and find the correct path. It is a test of logic, perception, and adaptability. Daniel frowned. That's it. A puzzle. One of the scholars smirked. Let's see if your human mind can handle it. The cube expanded, suddenly enveloping Daniel in a swirling world of holographic pathways. Inside the puzzle simulation, Daniel found himself floating in an endless maze of glowing lines and shifting patterns. Every time he took a step, the path behind him changed. A voice echoed around him. A riddle in the Zitherian tongue. A warrior has no blade, yet he strikes down his foes. A scholar has no voice, yet he speaks through the ages. What am I? Daniel gritted his teeth. A warrior with no blade. A scholar with no voice. Knowledge. The answer was knowledge. He reached out and touched the glowing path in front of him. The maze shifted, aligning itself. Another riddle appeared. I have no life, but I can grow. I have no lungs, but I can die. What am I? A fire. Daniel moved forward again, the pathways bending to his choices. More riddles followed. More shifting paths. The test was not just about knowing the answers. It was about adapting to the ever-changing patterns of the maze. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last riddle faded, and Daniel found himself standing back in the arena. The crowd was silent. Then, the chief advisor stood and spoke. The human has passed the first trial. A low murmur spread through the spectators. Some looked shocked, others angry. Daniel exhaled, his heart still racing. One test down. Daniel barely had time to catch his breath before the chief advisor stood again, his glowing robes shimmering under the violet sky. The human has passed the test of intelligence, he announced. Now he must face the test of endurance. A ripple of anticipation spread through the crowd. This was the trial most outsiders failed. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow and forced himself to stand tall. He had already survived the mental challenge. Now he had to prove he could keep going, no matter what. A Zitherian warrior, clad in dark armor, stepped forward. He was taller than Daniel, his muscular form radiating strength. His glowing silver markings pulsed slowly, a sign of control and discipline. "You will compete against a warrior of the Zitherian Guard," the chief advisor declared. "This is not a battle. It is a test of resilience. You must endure 3 rounds of challenges without yielding." Daniel swallowed hard. 3 rounds? What kind of challenges? Before he could ask, the first challenge was announced. Round 1. The gravity field. The ground beneath Daniel shifted, and suddenly he felt himself get heavier. A gravity field was activated, making every movement twice as difficult. His limbs felt like they were made of stone. The warrior across from him stood tall and unfazed, clearly accustomed to the intense pressure. Daniel gritted his teeth. This is just like resistance training. Keep moving. Don't stop. The challenge was simple. Stand for 5 minutes without falling. The first minute was easy. By the second minute, his legs started to shake. By the 4th minute, his breath came in gasps. The Zitherian warrior watched him carefully, but Daniel refused to give up. He dug his feet into the ground, clenched his fists, and focused on one simple thought: keep standing. Finally, the timer ended. The field deactivated, and Daniel nearly collapsed, but he caught himself just in time. The crowd murmured in surprise. Round 2, the endurance sprint. The second challenge was announced. A long track appeared, lined with shifting energy barriers. Daniel and the Zitherian warrior had to run the entire length without stopping. The moment the race started, Daniel sprinted forward, dodging the barriers that suddenly appeared in his path. His lungs burned, his muscles ached from the gravity test. But he pushed forward. The Zitherian warrior was faster, but Daniel had human adaptability. He zigzagged, rolled, and jumped in ways his opponent didn't expect. By the time he crossed the finish line, he was gasping for air, but he had done it. Round 3, the test of pain. The final round was the hardest. Daniel and the warrior had to stand inside a ring of pulsating energy, which sent out waves of discomfort, not enough to injure, but enough to test their ability to endure pain. Daniel clenched his jaw as the first wave hit his nerves like fire. Then another, and another. The Zitherian warrior stood motionless, his face unreadable. Daniel's breathing became ragged. His hands shook. His body screamed at him to step out of the ring, to end the pain. But he held on. He had endured worse. Memories flashed, long days of training, pushing through exhaustion, refusing to give up when everything seemed impossible. He was human. Humans didn't break easily. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the test ended. Daniel stumbled but stayed standing. The chief advisor looked at him with an unreadable expression. Then he spoke. The human has passed the test of endurance. A wave of shock went through the audience. Daniel exhaled deeply, his entire body aching. 2 trials down. Daniel's legs felt like they were made of lead as he stood in the center of the arena, his body still recovering from the brutal tests. The crowd was silent, watching him closely. Princess Vayara's violet eyes never left him, her gaze sharp and intense. The chief advisor stepped forward once more, his voice cutting through the tense silence. The final trial, The test of trust is about to begin. Daniel took a deep breath. His body was exhausted, his mind was worn, but he had come this far. There was no turning back now. A strange glowing orb appeared in the center of the arena, hovering above the ground. It emitted a soft hum, and as it spun, the air around it seemed to shimmer. "This is the trial of trust," the chief advisor explained. "You will have to rely on your instincts and judgment to succeed." Daniel narrowed his eyes. Rely on instincts. What did that even mean? Before he could ask, the orb split open, revealing a series of intricate light pathways leading to different sections of the arena. "You must navigate these pathways and reach the end," the chief advisor continued. "However, there is one catch. Along the way, you will face false paths and dangers. You must trust your instincts to guide you." Daniel stepped forward cautiously. The pathways before him were twisting and turning, impossible to predict. He glanced over at the Zitharian warrior, who had passed the first 2 trials with ease, but he was nowhere near ready for this final test. It was all up to Daniel now. The maze of trust. The first few steps were easy enough. The light pathways seemed to be guiding him in a clear direction. But as he walked, the light around him began to shift, and the air felt heavier. It was as if the pathways were changing before his very eyes, constantly testing his choices. The first false path appeared, a series of twisted, shadowy trails that led to a dead end. Daniel quickly turned back. No, this wasn't the right way. His heart raced as the next trail appeared, but it seemed even more complicated. The light shifted again, and Daniel's instincts told him to trust the path that looked the most uncertain. It was counterintuitive, but something about it felt right. He took a step forward. The pathway twisted, shifting into a narrow bridge over a deep chasm. The wind howled beneath him. And for a moment, Daniel's nerves got the best of him. The bridge trembled under his weight. Was it safe? But then he remembered the test. Trust his instincts. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stepped forward with determination, his footfall steady. The bridge held firm. The final choice. He neared the end of the maze, his heart pounding in his chest. The light paths led him to an enormous glowing door, the final gate. But before he could reach it, a strange figure appeared at the doorway. It was a shadowy silhouette, its shape unclear. For a split second, Daniel hesitated. The figure spoke in a voice that echoed in his mind. "Do you trust yourself, human? Will you pass the test?" The voice was like a whisper, but it felt as though it could pierce through his very soul. Daniel took a deep breath. "Yes," he muttered to himself. He stepped forward, his body weary, but his resolve stronger than ever. The figure faded, and the door swung open before him. A surprising outcome. As Daniel stepped through, the entire arena erupted in a roar. The chief advisor, along with the council, watched in stunned silence as he crossed the threshold. Daniel had passed the final trial. The chief advisor stepped forward, his expression a mix of disbelief and respect. "The human has passed all trials." Princess Vayara stood from her seat, her eyes never leaving him. There was something different in her gaze now, an unreadable look, but also one that held a newfound respect. Daniel was breathing hard, his body drained, but his heart was racing with a strange sense of accomplishment. He had survived the impossible, and somehow he had earned their respect. The chief advisor finally spoke. "The trials have ended. The human has proven himself worthy." The crowd cheered, and Daniel realized something. It wasn't just about surviving these challenges. It was about proving that humans, against all odds, could endure, adapt, and win. And for the first time, he felt like he truly belonged here, in this strange alien world, standing beside Princess Vayara and the Zitharian Empire. Daniel stood in the center of the arena, his body aching from the trials, but his mind was buzzing with disbelief. He had done it. He had passed all the trials, survived what no human had ever been asked to endure. And now, The entire Zitharian court was watching him. Princess Vayara, who had been silent for most of the day, now stood before him. Her violet eyes were filled with an emotion Daniel couldn't quite place. Admiration. Respect. He had expected the Zitharians to show him no mercy, but now he had earned something from them. A new level of respect that transcended alien customs. The chief advisor spoke first, his voice still heavy with authority. The human has proven his worth. He has completed the 3 trials, and we, the Zitharian court, acknowledge his success. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time since he arrived on this strange planet, Daniel allowed himself a small, genuine smile. But Vayara didn't smile. Her expression remained serious, as though she were still contemplating something deep within herself. She stepped forward, her steps silent but purposeful. The crowd fell silent, waiting for her words. You have passed all the trials, human, but there is one final thing I must address. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What's that? Her voice lowered, becoming softer, yet filled with a weight of significance. You have done more than survive these trials. You have shown the Zitharian Empire that humans possess something we did not expect. A strength, a resilience, a willpower that rivals even our finest warriors. You have earned our respect. And with it, an offer. Daniel's heart skipped. An offer. Vayara nodded. The Zitharian Empire is a vast and powerful entity, but it is built on more than just strength. It is built on alliances, and I believe that humanity has the potential to become more than just a distant ally. I offer you, Daniel Carter, the chance to join us, to forge a new path together, to build an empire where humans and Zitharians are united as equals. Daniel stared at her, trying to process the enormity of her words. He had come here to negotiate an alliance. Yes, but he never imagined it would come down to this. She was not just offering a partnership. She was offering something deeper, something permanent. The chief advisor cleared his throat, his face stoic. Princess, are you certain of this decision? Vayara's gaze shifted toward him, but her voice remained firm. Yes, I am certain. This human, this diplomat, has proven he has more than enough to offer our people. She turned back to Daniel, her expression softened slightly. You are not just a representative of your people anymore, Daniel. You are an equal in my eyes, and in the eyes of the Zitharian Empire. Daniel's mind raced. What could he say? What could he do? He had come here to save Earth, not to become part of an alien empire. But what if this was an opportunity for something even greater than he imagined? Finally, he found his voice. You're offering me more than just a treaty. You're offering me a place in your empire. Vayara nodded again. Yes, but that decision is yours. I will not force it upon you. Daniel paused for a moment, the weight of the choice pressing down on him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much bigger, about forging a future, not just for himself, but for humanity as a whole. He took a deep breath, looking around at the Zitharian court. Then he looked back at Vayara, her expression serious but open. Then I accept your offer, Princess. I will help build that future. A wave of approval rippled through the crowd. The Zitharians bowed their heads, their respect clear in their eyes. Vayara stepped closer, her hand reaching out toward him. Then let us build this future together, human. As Daniel shook her hand, he felt the weight of his decision, but also a strange sense of peace. For the first time since he arrived, he truly belonged. The future of Earth, of humanity, was no longer uncertain. It was now part of a much larger, brighter story. The days after Daniel's acceptance of Princess Vayara's offer passed in a blur of activity. He had come to Zitharia as a simple diplomat, sent to negotiate an alliance to secure Earth's future. Now he was an unexpected partner in a much larger game, one that stretched beyond simple treaties and into the very heart of a new intergalactic empire. He had accepted Vayara's offer not just for himself, but for humanity. It was a decision that weighed heavily on his shoulders, but with every passing day, he began to see the opportunity that lay before him. As he sat with the princess in the royal gardens, the sky overhead a deep shade of violet, Daniel couldn't help but marvel at how far his life had changed. The Cytherean gardens were unlike anything he had ever seen. Glowing flowers twisted toward the sky, their petals shimmering in the soft light of the twin moons. The air smelled of something sweet and foreign, and the sound of gentle water trickling from an ancient fountain created a calming atmosphere. Veyara sat across from him, her presence as commanding as ever. Despite the gentle setting, there was always a certain intensity about her, an energy that reminded him she was not just the heir to a throne. She was a leader, a ruler, and now his ally. "You look deep in thought," she remarked, her voice soft but piercing. Daniel smiled, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "Just thinking about how different this all is. A few weeks ago, I was just a guy from Earth trying to save his people. Now, I'm part of something much bigger." Veyara nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the soft light around them. "This was never meant to be easy. You have proven yourself worthy in ways that others might never understand. But now, the real work begins." He leaned back, his hands clasped in his lap. "What do you mean by real work?" The princess stood and walked toward the edge of the garden, gazing out at the distant horizon. "The Cytherean Empire is vast, Daniel. It has been built on strength and power, but it lacks something that Earth has in abundance: innovation, creativity, the qualities that made humanity thrive." Daniel's brow furrowed. "You're saying you want to change the way your empire works?" Veyara turned back to face him, her gaze unwavering. Yes. But not just that. We need to change the way the galaxy views us. Our strength has always been in our warriors, our defenses, but now we must focus on what we can build together." She paused. "Humans have the ability to change things, to make something from nothing. And I believe that together we can create something unimaginable." A quiet, determined silence settled between them. Daniel's thoughts raced as he considered her words. He had come here seeking an alliance, but now it felt as if he was being invited to build something far more important. A new future, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. For the first time, he realized that the future wasn't just about surviving. It was about creating a new path forward for both humans and Cytherians. Daniel stood up and walked toward her, his heart steady with conviction. "I'm ready, princess. Let's build that future." Veyara smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her usual regal demeanor. "Then we begin together." As they stood side by side, gazing at the new horizon, Daniel felt something shift within him. The weight of the trials, the uncertainty, and the fear had all been worth it. They weren't just allies anymore. They were partners, and together they would build something that no one had ever seen before.